I am very excited for the gentlemen before you to share their insights. We're here to talk about the future of F&B with regards to investments, and without further ado, I'd like to begin. So, I think we can all agree the F&B space is very dynamic. It's unlike anything else in the world in this region. And the driving force behind this sector is manufacturing, money, and people. And that's everyone on the stage, so let's rock and roll. Paul, I'm going to start with you. From IFCO, one of the largest multinational groups manufacturing, marketing food products. Can you share with us the F&B manufacturing landscape, the food chain?
Yeah, so IFCO, as you're familiar with, has a huge manufacturing operation in UAE and GCC in particular, while we might be there in other parts of the world as well. But I think we started here, and therefore the investments that IFCO has made in in UAE particularly across almost all food categories has been just huge. I mean, I don't want to get into the specific numbers, but hundreds of millions of dollars over the last, if I might say, 4 decades, and continuing to grow with our latest venture, which is the plant-based alternatives, which we just set up about 4 or 5 months back, or started operations 4 or 5 months back. So please understand that in the area of food production, and we're talking, most of our categories are center of the plate, whether it's flour, whether it's oil. So it's really, core food consumption items. And you can always challenge us by saying, why did you put up manufacturing in UAE? While it probably makes more sense to produce it in the origin. That's common sense. I don't think we need any discussion on that. But I think the promoters of IFCO really said that we need to be closer to the consumer and the customer. And I think that has held true for the last 4 decades. Certainly there are some disadvantages vis-a-vis being at the origin, but I think we make up more for that from our scale of operations, our ability to manage our freight and movement from origin, because please understand, most of the raw material has to come from outside. Starting from Brazil and Argentina, where you probably bring in soya, you bring in sunflower oil from Ukraine and Russia, you bring palm from Malaysia and Indonesia, you probably bring wheat from Canada and Ukraine. So the whole point is, how do you use the scale of IFCO to still be competitive in this market? So huge investments on manufacturing, of course, and huge investments in distribution, because that we believe is our core strength, and of course being closer to the consumer and the customer. And there's no better time, if I might say, when COVID happened. So we were there in UAE supporting consumers with all the products. We talk about working from home. There was no working from home because all our factories were running continuously, and there was no choice of question of not running, even if people were affected. So yeah, so the value chain in commoditized businesses like oil, flour, etc., is the margins are very thin, so you need to be extremely efficient in your scale of operations.
Very good point, Paul, especially about COVID and what we see.
Sorry, I can't hear you, sir.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm saying very good point. I think this was one of the best regions we could have all been in during COVID, and in terms of F&B, it brought up a lot of insights, very important points for us. Majid, I'd like to come to you. Now, in your role, you provide access, but not just access to capital, also access to markets. Can you take us through that ecosystem that we were talking about, both financial and non-financial support for SMMEs?
I mean, ECI, of course, is a federal entity with the mandate to support businesses here in the UAE, including manufacturers like IFCO. Obviously, we have a very well-established ecosystem. This ecosystem is to give access to funding, access to trade, access to new markets. We obviously ensure the non-payment of buyers, suppliers, including supply chain financing, project finance guarantees, buyer credit solutions. very bespoke in the way we work with our partners and businesses we support. The food industry obviously is a strategic industry that ACI has been fortunate enough to support. And I think we work very actively with our financial partners like EDB on number of projects, on number of initiatives, that be it working capital facilities if they are in the setup phase, or they're ensuring their receivables against non-payment. These are some of the simple solutions that we offer to our clients to ensure the sustainability of their exports, sustainability of their sales, and giving them access to new markets.
Thank you. Abdul Razak, you spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs, being from Shira. Now, there's been an increasing demand in F&B entrepreneurs, especially within food tech ideas and concepts. What are investors looking to invest in, especially when it comes to food tech?
Sure. So and I think echoing what my colleague panelists have touched upon, so COVID definitely did sort of accelerate the demand and the focus on food tech and especially driven by food securities. And so when we look at what investors are looking for in terms of interest specificities within the sector, they're looking at innovative but also scalable products, right? And especially nowadays, offerings that also address sustainability concerns are in line with market demands. And I think this is where a lot of the focus goes into as well, educating the entrepreneurs to understand, and this is what Shira does as the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center, in terms of coaching and mentoring those entrepreneurs and understanding how to approach investors, how to be investor ready, and also how to basically overcome some of the obstacles, because realistically, as early stage founders, they're not going to be able to secure easy funding, right? This is where the biggest concern and the biggest challenge comes in play. And this is where then we need to help them come up with innovative ways as we try to instill that mindset into how to overcome it and how to basically be able to enter the market, be able to validate a product without needing the millions of dollars in investment to build manufacturing facilities, to build production lines. And this is where I think collectively then together as ecosystem partners here, we need to help them basically and come up with ways to encourage the way of creative thinking, coming up with new products as early stage founders in order to get them to a stage where they can be ready for raising investments.
Yeah, I think it's a big misconception that it's really easy to get the funding. I know a lot of people think us in Dubai, we all live in the Burj Khalifa and we drive Lamborghinis, but that is not the case. Sankar, I want to come to you. On and off the stage, you talk very passionately about sustainability. And I'd like to bring in the topic of sustainability onto the floor. Can you describe the design model for manufacturing sustainability? How do you do both of these things well?
Thank you, Simone. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and of course, my fellow panel colleagues here. The theme of future food is inspire sustainable well-being. That's how everything starts. Before I go in detail answering you, I need to take you back, every one of you, some 7-8 years before, how this inspiration starts. It starts from the leadership. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed said, the last barrel of oil we will send from here. We will create a model which will be sustainable enough for any fluctuations. And see, after 7-8 years from then, our country's GDP is almost 70-80% non-oil independent. So this is how the leadership has inspired us. Now, taking forward that inspiration, we industry leaders, stakeholders, we are every day focusing more that how we can take sustainability in a more tangible and implementable way. You see, sustainability is just not climate change, or it's not just, saying that we have reduced carbon footprint. I think sustainability is much bigger than that. It should bring a more of a circular economy where everyone's well-being is taken care of. In that way, today we have solar park in Dubai, which is operational, right? And it's going to serve almost 1 million households with clean energy. So that's a step what we are taking. Coming back to us, we are very much active in this country in the manufacturing facility where we promote sustainability in 6 key areas. What are those 6 key areas? One is, of course, energy efficiency. This is very important. You need to be efficient on that. You need to be having energy conservation. You need to have water conservation. And very importantly is employee well-being. That's a part of this whole sustainability drive. So to achieve this is not so easy than what we say. There are a lot of challenges in between. But as a common stakeholders here, we were taking steps. And I'm sure slowly going forward, this step what we are taking will make everyone's future generation more sustainable. Saying that, I want to thank everyone, and any questions we'll be happy to take.
Thank you so much, Sankar. I think it's very important what you said. We're all doing what we're doing so that we can sustain for the future generations to come. Abdullah, I'd like to bring you in from the development bank point of view. What criteria are you looking for? What sustainable initiatives drive the lending and the funding process?
Thank you very much for including us as Emirates Development Bank in the panel discussion here. If you allow me, maybe I will take, let's say, a small preamble here to just bring you up to the criteria that you have requested for. We look into the manufacturing of the food security, or the food security in general, as a different objective. I can voice out what Mr. Shankar has said, is that sustainability here is not only to have the sources of energy being sustainable, rather than we also want to see that the projects that are happening in the UAE are sustainable for the long run. They add the value to the country back in for the long run, for the next and over generations. Also, this will help in creating a healthy ecosystem. This is one of the areas that we focus on Emirates Development Bank, because our priority sectors here include manufacturing, advanced technology, food security, renewable, and uniquely to the food security projects, it hits more than one sector with us. We look at it very favorably. Moreover, also what is important for the food security in general, or also for the food manufacturing process, is we look for it from end-to-end approach. We look into the growers, we look into the logistics service, we look at the manufacturers, we look at the processors, we look also to some extent to helping and development of the economic zones that foster such activities. Going back to the criteria, now, given the fact that Emirates Development Bank is the only development bank here in the UAE, and we are trying to fill in a gap that is there in the market where I wouldn't claim that we are doing something totally different than the commercial bank sector, rather we want to complement their activities. They do focus a lot on their strengths rely a lot on the trading, working capital activities, filling the gaps and the receivable cycle. Where we would want to fill in here is that give the financing solutions to help and to putting in the green project, greenfield, brownfield, expansions, new projects, enable them to happen here in the UAE. Now, there is an angle of it that where government support is important and government partnership is important, and we encourage that through the PPP models. But also private sector to stand on their own, be competitive in the global market is also very important to be put in place. Now, one important factor that we need to be very aware of here, especially in this part of the world, is that technology. technology enablement is an important factor that will also provide efficient use of energy, efficient use of water, reducing of waste, increase in the yield, increase in production, availability, continuity. That is something that we also want to see happening in these. Now, what EDB do differently here, a little bit here, is that we do provide patient capital, which means that the financing solutions here are matching to the project requirements. They go beyond what is needed to fill in few years of financing, rather all the way to the full journey. This is something unique, and it shows that the commitment of the government of the UAE toward enabling such activities. Also, green solutions, using green energy. This is something very important for us to see. If we can see that they can, the investors can negotiate better financing terms. One more thing, last thing here before I pass it on to you, is that now we see the in-country value is very important for us, and this has been encouraged heavily from the Ministry of Industries and Advanced Technology, where we should encourage activities to use more of resources of the UAE to produce. Take advantage of the available here, substitute import, encourage export. Different agendas that we work on. I don't want to board you and the panelists for also with what we also look into. And I'm happy to also take in any questions or specifics related to this.
That's very interesting, Abdullah. Thank you. So basically, you know, the greener the project, the greener the idea, the more food security focused it is, then better chances of getting it funded, right?
Exactly. Or better financing terms.
Better financing terms. Okay, yes, that's very interesting. Paul, I want to come to you in terms of sustainability. I mean, we know that sustainability is not just good for future planet environment. It's also beneficial to all stakeholders involved. Can you share some successful examples of your own from IFCO?
Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about the company that I work for, because over the last 4 to 5 years, I think we have taken a lot of steps. And I'll start with the vision statement, because, you know, we kept discussing with the internal teams, and we said, you know, our vision statement is preferred provider of value-added products and services to consumers and customers every day, everywhere. And we changed it to preferred provider of sustainable products and value-added products and services, etc. So starting from there, I think I would say we really started walking the talk over the last 4 to 5 years, okay? And really got serious, because we have operations globally, and we have really got down to having a complete sustainability team. And more importantly, because please understand, you have business units across the world. Everyone will tell you, you know, I've got this quarter, I've got this year to manage, and you're asking me to invest in so many things. So I think it's a question of change and behavior and culture across the organization. I wouldn't say we have reached peak performance, if I might say, as yet. We're still learning as we go along, but I think we've taken a lot of steps as a company, not just in the UAE, but across the world where we have operations. We have operations, about 95 operations, and we export to probably 100 countries across the world with 26 or 27 large sites. And in all of them, I think what we brought down specifics, because I think we needed to put certain specific targets for ourselves. What we said internally is to, drop our carbon emissions by 17%. This was in 2021, where we said by 2025. Please understand, you'll be growing at a rate of 10-15%, though in spite of your growth, you should still be 17% below your 21 figure. Okay, so that entailed a whole host of activities and initiatives. First is to measure your carbon footprint. And I think we have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, etc. Scope 1 and 2 is more internal of what you do for yourself and see how you can reduce. And scope 3 is not entirely in your control, because it is raw material procurement. It is the carbon footprint if I am buying palm oil from Malaysia, Indonesia, or I'm buying soya from Argentina. So the carbon footprint right across the chain. And that's very large, because we are in agri products. But we took a target of a 17% reduction, and we are on the way to kind of achieve that. We talked about zero deforestation. I mean, there's a lot of hue and cry about palm oil and the deforestation that has happened, not just here, but even in the Amazon in Brazil. And so we've started actually satellite monitoring across Malaysia and Indonesia. We haven't completed it fully, but we are at about 40–45% of, which is almost the size of Tunisia, where we have satellite monitoring to understand what is our supply chain going to be, and can we move to a situation where we are deforestation free, at least in our supply chain, and what we call the effects of peat. So remove that in our system. Yes, there are costs. Are you going to see the benefit immediately? The answer is no. Is the consumer going to pay for it? Difficult question. Okay, so a lot of consumers are not. So those are the challenges which are there. But I think we are in the process of actually completing that whole agenda, and hopefully do that soon. The whole point is, when you're buying, there are only 2 countries that produce palm oil. How do you actually trace it to the plantation and to the mill? So we have reached a traceability of 100% on the mill and 85% to the plantation. So anything that goes into our supply chain globally, 85% of it we know which plantation it's coming from. Still some distance, we have the 15% to cover. Okay. The third area is what we call wash for work. And the whole area of water usage because we are food manufacturing, there's hygiene, sanitation, and water. And how do we, run our operations effectively, but at the same time save water, which is a precious resource. So there's a lot of work going on that for us over the next 2 years, by 25, to be what we call, the global standard to be achieved in our 26, 27 facilities. Finally, the most interesting thing is energy, and especially in the Middle East. And when you say energy costs, some countries are low, some countries are high, and how do you still ensure your costs are competitive? So it's challenging, and we've really got down to a combination of things on energy, led by, if I might say, green energy through the whole solar panel system to at least reduce the impact from the grid and then get on to that. And as we speak, we are having about 12 of our sites, some of them completely completed and the others in process. We're doing a lot of energy efficiency projects here, right in the UAE. 3 of our largest units, we're looking at where is the wastage of electricity and power in our system, and is there an opportunity to save? And we're looking at close to 14–15% savings, the way we've been operating vis-a-vis hopefully how we will, and obviously with some investments involved to correct that. And the last part, again, please understand, most of our industries, you run boilers, okay? And you have, what is your fuel? Your fuel is largely diesel or gas. And we are actively now looking at biomass in at least countries where it's easily accessible. But if you ask me, what is your one agenda that you have over the next few years? I know it's a dream, and a lot of people think I'm stupid as well, is to actually see whether I can do biomass in Saudi Arabia. Okay, we have a very large refinery in Saudi Arabia, and you will always tell me that, the diesel prices are so low. Why would you use diesel? Why would you bring biomass into Saudi to run your boilers in one of the largest refineries? Difficult question, difficult answer, but we're working at it. Not sure whether we'll achieve success, but we hope to come somewhere close.
I think I'm looking forward to talking to you in the future to finding out how that goes. Abdul Razak, I'll come to you now. Can you give us a little bit of context? You mentioned very briefly before the challenges when it comes to securing funding. I'll position it to you like this. Being in the F&B space in terms of startups, food tech ideas, and entrepreneurs, how can the F&B startup industry foster better relationships with investors? What can they do? And we've got investors on the panel and in the room. So how can they get better at building relationships with investors?
That's the million-dollar question. So maybe I think taking a step back and understanding why it's challenging, first of all, to secure funding. The main reason is a lot of the investors, may it be debt investors or your traditional VC investors or even angel investors in the market, would be looking for something that is safe enough, right? So with a track record, with a proven model, with market validation, with even some revenue generated. And to get to that as a F&B startup or an early stage founder, this is where it becomes your catch-22 sort of equation to figure out. So you need the money to get the market validation and produce the product and get it tested. But to get that, you also need money, and like you're stuck in the middle as a founder. And I think one thing that as Shira we started looking at recently, and especially given the position as Sharjah being one of the hub for manufacturing in general, not only F&B but across different sectors, is actually trying to help overcome this validation obstacle for founders beyond the coaching and mentorship that we already provide to entrepreneurs. But it's actually creating a safe test bed for them to be able to then launch products without the heavy capital needed in the beginning, to be able to build the case with actual data that then could be presented to investors. And that test bed basically is in collaboration with the big players in the market, right? So the existing industry players that have the facilities. We have an example actually, and this is where, again, we rely on data to replicate. We have an example not necessarily in F&B, but in manufacturing, where we have a startup that produces sustainable capsules. It's called Kima, and what they do basically is these capsules are water soluble. So for cleaning surfaces, instead of buying these one-time use plastics from the supermarkets, you can refill the bottle and just keep adding the capsules to it. This startup, again, realistically, with the IP they have, were not able to go into the market and raise funding. There was not enough validation for them to approach investors. But what worked for them is for the past 2 years, they've actually been producing, manufacturing, and selling without needing to build a facility. And by that, this is where the safe test bed comes in and the idea. They've been incubated, not the business incubation perspective that we offer as Shira and other players in the market, but actually manufacturing incubated. So they actually have built a facility within the National Paints factory in Sharjah, relied on their back end of experience, engineers, some of their machinery, to be able to actually produce, enter the market, and today they're revenue generating. And today they actually can approach investors and say, by the way, this is my track record, this is what we've been doing in sales, invest in me so that I can expand, maybe detach from this factory, open my own facility. And so this is a model that we're trying to replicate with other players in the market, other industry sectors, F&B specifically, of course, but manufacturing in general, to allow for this validation effort to happen in a more easy way. The other side as well, in terms of making or working collectively as ecosystem players, so between the manufacturers that already exist, the government entities, the investors, is there's also an education factor that we can all work on together. Not to the founders themselves, which is, again, there's an abundance of it in the market. We do it, and other accelerators and incubators do it. Now it's also taught in universities and schools, but more to the investors. So that investor education for new investors, angel investors, to understand from industry, players and giants, the risks, but also the benefits of investing in F&B startups, the potential of returns in it, to be able to then tap into a new pool of capital that for now has been preferred, into fintech or real estate, the safer, more approachable sectors. I think this is where collectively we can start working, and we've done it, we've seen it in the past as well, where the more you educate investors and new investors, the untapped capital that you have in such a, we have the blissfulness of being in the UAE. There is capital available, but I think with education and sort of opening the eyes of new investors into the potential of this market, you'll be able to overcome the early stage of struggles for a startup, right? So the early days, which is you have an idea, you maybe have a prototype, an early stage product, but you don't have the money to produce it, to package it, to get the licenses, approvals, all these stamps that you need on it before you can get it on the shelves or to the consumers. All of this could be supported by basically accessing untapped capital. And lastly, an example as well that will help, and again, this is something that happens, but could happen as well at a larger scale, and this is where partnerships are needed as well, which is creating grant pools for these early stage founders. So actual pools of money that is made available for early stage, risky, of course, smaller sized, that will allow them to just basically overcome the obstacle. Ultimately, all of this, what I'm saying and what we're doing, is to get them ready to sit in front of an investor. You still need that funding, but until you're ready to get there, this is where these steps need to happen. And it's a collective effort, so it's a combination between manufacturers, industry players, government entities, even academic institutions, to get all of those those pieces of the puzzle together in order to push the entrepreneurs further and encourage them to enter the market or this sector, right? So that we were speaking earlier about it. It still is perceived to a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs as a difficult market to enter, overcrowded. There's big players already in it. How would you be able to compete with them? Not clarity on an exit strategy. So if I enter with a product, what will be my exit strategy? Am I gonna franchise it? Am I gonna basically end up selling it to another industry player? Because you need these answers before you approach an investor. No one's gonna take you seriously unless you have that full plan in front of you.
Well, hopefully you have helped somebody in the room today be close enough to getting ready to sit in front of investors. Speaking of risk, Majid, I want to come to you. It's not just about getting the money. It's also about protecting the investment, protecting the finance. Can you underline the importance of finance protection?
Sure. I think I just want to build on what Abdulrazak was saying. I think what we at ECI do is obviously mitigate the risk of receivable. Typically, a lot of institutions always have issues when it comes to selling on credit. Most businesses in this region sell on credit, and payment terms are typically the 90 days, 120 days, 180 days, and so forth. So what we do is we obviously assess the buyers, and we have a full risk underwriting team that assesses these buyers. And based on the assessment, we come back with limits granted to our, let's say, policyholders. And they basically ensure to give them or sell on open credit. This obviously helps to export more, to grow your sales, to ensure your receivables, and obviously help you with getting more funding access with the banks. So banks typically like credit insurance wrapped solutions when it comes to some of the facilities they grant to their clients. And with this wrap, obviously it helps them to grow their business, to ensure their receivables, to unlock more capital for other opportunities. So this way we mitigate the risk with these credit insurance solutions that we have. The common product that we offer is a product called whole turnover solution. This typically oversees the overall portfolio of your turnover that you have in terms of your clients or buyers, let's say in this case. And based on that, this is the usual wrap that we create or provide to a lot of our policyholders so that they can benefit from the credit insurance cover. Eligibility criteria is very straightforward. We usually look at if there is an in-country value, if there are exporters, if they're in a strategic sector such as food processing or food manufacturing or food security. These are typically some of the key eligibility criteria that we always look at. And based on that, we come back with a fair assessment and let's say a new innovative solution versus the conventional trade finance solutions that we typically see in the market. We're not trying to take away more business from the banks, but really more complementing and aligning together to really expand the non-oil exports of the UAE.
Thank you so much. It's very interesting. I'd like to come back to you, Sangna. I want to find out from you, what are some of the challenges in manufacturing that haven't been adequately addressed till the day?
So, Simon, thank you. I was hearing Brother Abdullah, Brother Majid, and everyone. You know, I think the challenges of funding or challenges of investing is slowly it will get much easier for manufacturers and industries. But I think the bigger challenge lies in the boardrooms, in our boardrooms. Most of the time, we perceive sustainability like a cost center. And that's where the discussions keeps on moving. But I think it's actually a profit center, and that's how it has to run through the organization. And that is the mind frame or the change what we need in every organization to overcome challenges. Otherwise, the steps whatever we take, if there is no ethical practice of what we say, and if we are not enforcing that ethical practice in the entire value chain, and we confine it only to our manufacturing unit and don't spread it to the route to market, starting from the supplier side, we all should emphasize that, you know, our suppliers should have the same sustainability goals what we as a manufacturer are having. So I would like to keep this little bit out of the box, that we should not just get, you know, satisfied. We have a lot of work to do, and this is a starting, and we have achieved a lot with everyone's participation, change in the mind frame, thinking sustainability more of a profit center than a cost center will take us to the journey much smoother.
Thank you, Sankar. I think you're right. We do have a long way to go, but this is a fantastic start, and I think we're making a lot of progress. Abdullah, I want to come to you and find out all stakeholders involved. How can they reduce risk and ensure successful return on investment?
Okay, to get into this point, I can explain one thing here. Now, as a financial institution, we do face a certain challenge here related to the manufacturing activities. And these two challenges can be looked into from two sides. Number one, the consumer behavior is ever changing, so whatever used to be practiced 10 years ago is not the same now. At the same time, the manufacturers also have changed their practices and the approach to the market. Their funding requirements has also changed. Now, I can also add to Mr. Shankar here what you have said on the challenges. Financial institutions are heavily regulated industries. And Mr. Majid also can voice that out, that we are running through within a heavy regulated framework that we would want to mitigate the risk as much as possible. And these risks are not only the repayment risk. Repayment risk will always be wrapped through insurances, through securitization. However, now we run through sometimes new territories that we haven't faced before. The COVID, as you just mentioned, is the risk that doesn't fall here, doesn't fall there. It's something that to be cognizant about. Shipping issues that happened a year ago or 18 months ago, something that we are not aware of also and we didn't foresee. Things like that also can be looked into, can be mitigated. How it can be mitigated, or the risk of making sure that banks' rights are also preserved, at the same time the manufacturers and the producers are also are preserved, is something that is evolving and something that we are working with the industries to learn from them. At the same time, they can also see what we are requiring and we can adjust that. For example here, we started as banks, especially as a development bank, as EDB, is to get more details into related to the feasibilities that has been put in place by the manufacturing industries to see that it goes beyond what are the numbers are telling us. It goes beyond what repayment capabilities are there. We look into the market now. We look into what the market, how the market perceive such changes in this. I praise also IFCO for adding the alternative plant or the plant-based manufacturing, which is a new territory in this region. I'm sure that it has been practiced elsewhere. But here in this region, it's dynamic. So we are also learning from them. We can see what they are doing here, and we can see other players are also tagging along and starting to learn and do something, sometimes tweak the formula. Now, how the formula works, this is something we rely on the industries and the consultants and how they validate that and how it would be of something that a bank can take comfort of. It's an ocean of risk that we are looking into here, and we are always open for discussions and open discussions with the industries, with our partners here, including ECI, our partners, the ministries, the economic zones. We engage with them regularly to see that what is relevant now, what is relevant also.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Abdullah.
thank you.
You've driven it all the way to my final question, which I want to address it to everybody on this panel. How can, and I'll start with you, Abdullah, if you don't mind, how can banks, how can entrepreneurs, how can manufacturing, basically everybody on the stage, how can we work together to ensure an attractive future for the F&B landscape in terms of investment?
Thanks. I would say I can summarize that into one word: governance. If everybody practice correct governance, for example, from the financial institutions, where everything the financial institution is doing for a purpose, and by governance, it's also touch base into the ESG framework and why banks are doing some, requiring some asks or some relaxing some asks, and transparency from the industries where their agendas are also open and they are telling, and there is a mutual dialogues, open dialogues between the two parties of what is the purpose of doing anything and what is the agenda and the objectives. That would help a lot. And I can see that this started to happen post the crisis that happened in 2008, and transparency, stronger governance, ESG framework started to getting built into a lot of the projects going forward and happened in the past.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Majid.
I think from my side, I would say that it's really leveraging on the ecosystem that we have today. We have a fantastic ecosystem when it comes to really the financial partners, the regulators, the governing bodies, the right institutions that are basically facilitating all of these sort of solutions. I think it's all there. It's just that we need to leverage on this ecosystem and seize the opportunities. This is why we always have these forums, to create active market awareness, to create, educating the market as to, look, we have these solutions, we have these partners. We're all here to really benefit the trade industry and the manufacturers. We all have the same mandate, and and I think it's all about really working together, collaborating, and having that common alignment and agenda, really.
I mean, I could sit here and talk to you guys all day, but I do not have the luxury. I've been flagged. So really quickly, Paul, if you can also give us a summary of how we can work together to ensure an attractive future for F&B.
No, I think there's lots that's happening in UAE, and I think both industry and all these banking institutions, as well as other fora, we need to engage much more closely. And I know it's easier said than done, because everyone gets into their typical work day, and then it becomes difficult to carve out time. But having said that, I think the whole area of sustainable finance and stuff like that from the banks of this region, I think will certainly help companies like us who are spending quite a bit of money to go there. Mm-hmm. There are two parts to this always. It's very easy to talk about sustainability, but there are two parts. One is what industries like us do on our own initiative. The other is the government that we were talking about. And third is the banks. And finally, there's the consumer or the customer who demands a product which is more sustainable. Mm-hmm. So there are really four pillars to really making this work. So we are still there in bits of it. I think there are banks that are getting into helping us along the way as well, with clear directives of how we should every successive year move in the area of sustainability. interactions, more interactions to really see what is available, and we work with all the gentlemen on the platform today, and but we need to do more of it, and I think that's really what makes UAE so special.
Thank you so much, Paul. Abdul Razak, very quickly, and then Sankar, very quickly, give us your last statements, how we can work together.
I mean, the fellow panelists have already touched on most of the points. I think to summarize, it's basically just everyone coming together, sitting on the same table and agreeing on the one direction that we're going towards, right? Which is there, we all know it, but agreeing on it, clarifying it, and just setting all the requirements to get there together will help us basically achieve the alignment eventually to create the impact and the results that we're all looking for.
Fantastic. Sankar.
Less than 60 seconds, Nicole.
Go.
So I'm sure that, we don't have any issue in this country on leveraging government and private public sector strength. I'm 100% sure that there will be no looking back on that. What I think, what is more important, which I'm stressing more and more, is we need to now, as business leaders, industry representatives, we should look more for not only what the promoters or shareholders want, we should go more to what they're looking for. And that has to be transformed to the entire organization. So I'm sure that everyone, it's a lunchtime, but they are patiently hearing us. So I think we have a very sustainable discussion today.
Yeah, we're standing in the middle of a lunch. We do not want to be hated. Gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. What you've done here is shared years of experience in less than an hour. It's been a pleasure chairing this session with you. And thank you guys for your time and your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.